This is without a doubt the most recognisable aircraft in the sky. An aircraft that was a failure in practice, but far from as bad as people now think. In fact, I think it's great. That's right, fear not. Fans, there is redemption in this video. A light at the end of the tunnel. For I, Capt, am here to bring you a third perspective on this awesome aircraft. The Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt II. On the 8th of September 1966, the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, General John P. McConnell, sent out the order for a replacement to the A-1 Skyraider, the only winged close air support aircraft really in use at the time that was becoming more and more outdated. But why? What was so important about having such an aircraft? What even is CAS? And no, it's not what F-35s were designed for. Close air support is the role of air assets engaging hostile units that are within close proximity to friendly units. Yeah, it's basically in the name. This can be fulfilled by many aircraft, but the condition of the airspace is a big factor in which option is the most efficient and effective. Helicopters are brilliant at fulfilling this role, however, there are a number of benefits to choosing a fixed wing aircraft over a chopper, such as payload or time to target. This is where the US military realised they needed an aircraft that could support ground elements in contested airspace, with high altitude aircraft becoming more vulnerable. An AC-130, for example, may not be a wise idea if your enemy still has effective air defences, and helicopters vulnerable to ground-based fire. The A-10 is designed specifically for this very scenario. It would be criminal to discuss the Warthog and not at least briefly cover the star of the show. Equipped with a Gore 8A Avenger autocannon that is still capable of tearing through armour to this very day, with 7 barrels of 30mm spitting hatred at 3900 RPM, providing around 45 kilonewtons of force when firing, 5 more kilonewtons than the A-10's engines, it will indeed accelerate backwards when firing. And yes, this gun can still penetrate armour. It would be wrong for me not to mention, however, that more modern tanks are much harder to penetrate and making the gun less effective at taking out heavy armour. That said, it would also be wrong not to note that tanks can be easier to knock out than many think, as was seen recently in Ukraine when a Bradley absolutely rocked a T-90M with its 25mm Bushmaster. So to pretend an A-10's main gun still couldn't make an impact would be equally unfair. It's a mean machine, and if used on the battlefield today would still keep people diving for cover. Though, if any British infantry are nearby, they likely will too. The mighty Warthog is also more than capable at low flying operations, with large unswept high aspect ratio wings and large ailerons providing excellent low speed, low altitude manoeuvrability. Evading enemy radar while also being comfortable operating at that altitude, which was vital in the case the Cold War went a bit warm. When flying low, however, there are still threats. Light anti-air fire and shoulder-fired missiles were in their element against low-flying aircraft, but the A-10 was designed with this considered. A titanium bathtub protects the pilot, as well as double redundant hydraulic flight systems accompanied by a mechanical system that functioned even if the hydraulics were lost, with engines positioned to protect against damage from foreign objects on unprepared runways and exhaust directed to help shield them from infrared surface-to-air missiles. With numerous cases of A-10s returning to base after taking a lot of damage, such as that of the case of Captain Campbell landing in manual reversion mode with a system of cables and pulleys after taking heavy ground fire in Iraq. It's not hard to see why the mighty Warthog earned its nickname as the Flying Tank. This isn't where it ends though. The A-10 design was remarkably simple, many parts being interchangeable from left to right, for example. It was built with the consideration to forward bases operating in suboptimal conditions in an all-out war scenario, where resupply could be untenable, a far cry from the wars in the Middle East where US air supremacy and logistical chain was essentially completely uncontested. And this is why I personally love the A-10. It was clearly a fantastic aircraft, and anyone who tries to pretend it isn't cool is lying. And I think it's completely unfair to deny this, but it also kind of sucked. Confused? Let me explain. The A-10 was ultimately designed for a war that never came. One that would have looked much different to recent wars the West has fought, where instead of undisputed long-term control of the skies, there would instead be highly contested and dangerous skies. A war where supply chains would be at threat, runways damaged and out of action. That war was won with the USSR. Sure, if we look at how the A-10 performed in Iraq or Afghanistan, aircraft that could utilise precision munitions from higher altitudes were ultimately far safer, effective and outperformed the A-10. Aircraft such as the F-111. However, in a war with the USSR, the Warthog likely would have been far more effective than these aircraft until control of the skies would be gained. There is the well-documented issue of the A-10's friendly fire incidents, down to its outdated systems, leaving pilots to rely on using literal binoculars to tell if a vehicle was an enemy or a friend. It's not hard to see the A-10 is running its course and getting old. But I think it's fair to say that's always going to be an issue for even the best of aircraft. It's important to make clear, I think it's time for the Warthog to go. Not because I dislike it, but because it's no longer fit for the world it exists in today. Due to all this, however, it's lately become almost trendy to hate on the poor little Thunderbolt. But I don't think this is fair. I think there's room for some nuance, and why I think this iconic aircraft should still be one of your favourites. While the US has not found themselves in highly contested skies with conventional war for quite some time, we currently have a great example to draw conclusions and learn from, that being the war in Ukraine. See, Russia and Ukraine have both found that much of their aircraft are unable to really provide much support given the serious threat of SAM systems. While the A-10's Soviet competitor, the Su-25, has become almost symbolic in the war, being one of the few aircraft capable to really handle these conditions, with its rugged design and capability at low altitude, making it well at home while other aircraft are relegated to their hangars, or launching the occasional long-range missile from Russian airspace. Sure, there are Su-25s being shot down, and sure, they are not providing the same air support as more advanced platforms, but they're there. They're in the field, able to at least put in some work while other airframes are collecting dust. What I'm getting at here is, yes, for the wars America has fought in, the A-10 was not the best choice, but in the wars it was designed for, it makes sense, and current examples indicate it likely would have been a vital asset in this dire situation. In the end, the Soviet collapse meant this never came. In essence, I love the A-10, not for what it turned out to be, but because I know how good it could have been. The wars where it hasn't performed well as other aircraft are the wars that favour less rugged and more precise equipment. Now trust me, I'm no reformer, and I'm not saying to keep the A-10 in service for another 2, 3, 4 decades. But someone who recognises that different situations require different solutions. I get it, the amount of people treating it like a literal wonder weapon were frustrating. Big gun go brr. However, maybe in combating the hype we've gone too far. But it is old and undeniably overdue retirement, with the tank killing role being easily filled by gunships like the Apache, and as the idea of war with a superpower in Europe is now no longer a possibility. The A-10 finds itself out of place in the modern world, and inevitably will soon see retirement as it realistically should. With that said, it's always going to have a special place in my heart, and I think it still should for you too.